All right, welcome, you guys. I'm so excited today. So today this is a friend over social media, and this is my first time meeting her. I had another friend connect me with her, which I'm so excited. She is an adoption mama, and she's got beautiful, beautiful children, because yes, I did stalk her profile. They're just beautiful. So I'm so excited that she said yes to share her story. And her name is Lila, and she has I just love her account too. She's got some great stuff that she shares on there as well. And she's funny and loving, and I love her already, and hopefully we can meet one day in person. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to her, and she can just share her story with us.
Thank you so much. So I guess our adoption story, I always feel like it came from a place of selfishness because I really just always wanted to be a mom my whole life. And when my husband and I met and married, he's older than me. And so we were like, we're going to try and have kids right off the bat. And after a year, we were diagnosed with infertility. And so then we started the whole fertility treatments and that whole rabbit hole. And so we did that for a couple of years. And it just kind of exhausts you mentally and physically. And adoption was not a foreign concept to either of us. I have an older brother who was adopted, and then my husband was adopted by his stepfather. So it just seemed like a normal, natural way to build a family to us. And so after a while, we were like, okay, maybe this is how our family will be created, is through adoption and not through our biology or DNA. And I know for some people that's important. For us, it just wasn't important to have biological children. We just wanted to have children. So then we kind of began the adoption process, which, I know you've interviewed some other adoptive moms, and they've talked about, all the paperwork and the interviews and the home study, so there's a lot that goes into it. Initially, we were going to do a domestic adoption of a newborn baby. That was our plan. But we had 2 failed adoptions of newborn babies. And, at some point we were just like, okay, what is going on? Nothing worked with the fertility treatments, and now we've had 2 failed adoptions. Are we just not good people that should be parents, or what is the deal here? And so that's when we decided to maybe look at international adoption. We knew going international we would not get a baby. I mean, we could probably get a toddler, or an older child. But at the same time, I was like, we have been waiting years to be parents, and there are kids that are already born waiting for a family. So does it really matter if they're a baby? And we decided for us, it didn't matter. We just, again, wanted to be parents. And so my brother had some friends that had adopted from Haiti. We met the kids. They were amazing kids. We just fell in love with them. And so that kind of piqued our interest in Haiti. And we looked into the adoption requirements to adopt from there and the process and all of that. So we had to do additional paperwork because now we're going to another country. And so we tweaked the paperwork, went through all of the extra. Like, we had to have an interview with a psychiatrist to make sure we were of sound mind. And he really talked to us a lot about learning all we could about their culture and incorporating that into our home and our family life, which I appreciate a lot. I have lots of thoughts on that, but I won't get off on that tangent right now. But so we began the process to adopt from Haiti. We contacted an orphanage there, and she sent me the details of how it would work, what the process was like. And then at the very end of it, she says, I need to back up. We were like, just thinking we were going to adopt one child and that would be it. So at the very end of the email, she says, just to let you know, there was a sibling group brought in today of a boy and a girl, and I've attached their picture if you're interested. So of course I scroll down to the picture and I'm like, oh, those are our kids. Now I know people think I'm crazy and that they're like, oh, she just fell in love with this photo. But we had seen multiple photos because we had tried different routes. You know, we had tried domestic, we had tried foster to adopt. You know, there were a couple of different things before we got to this point. And so I had seen lots of photos of adorable little kids, but it was like I recognized them when I saw their picture. I was like, those are our kids. It was a boy and a girl. And I was like, okay, how am I going to convince James to change from one child to two? And so I just showed him the picture and he had the same reaction. He was like, those are our kids. So we began the process to adopt those specific children. At the time, I don't know because they've been home for 11 years now. So I don't know how the adoption process in Haiti has changed. But at the time, it was a very long process. It took us almost 3 years to get them home. But we were allowed to go visit like every 6 months. And so we did that, which in hindsight, I don't know if that was the best thing to do. Our thought process at the time was, since they're older kids, because our daughter was 6, and well, no, she wasn't 6 at the time. She was 3 at the time. She was 6 when she got home. 3, and then Samuel was a baby. And so he was like 18 months, somewhere in there. And we were like, well, since they're older and they'll be older when they get home, we don't want to just come in at the end and grab them up and they're terrified and come home with us. You know, we thought if we were familiar and they had a little bit of a relationship, and that did happen, but it was heartbreaking to leave them every time because they would just cry and didn't want us to go. And I think that probably was not the best decision now that hindsight's 2020, right? But I'm also glad that we did it because we got to experience Haiti, their beautiful, beautiful birth country, and learn more about it and eat the food and experience it in a way that we wouldn't have if we hadn't gone and visited every 6 months. So no situation's perfect, right? So we went through that very long process. The longest process was immigration, honestly, immigration on the US side. And that alone took almost a year to get their visas approved and get them home. And I do want to just interject. At the time, you know, I wanted the kids home, and I was so frustrated. It seemed like we hit every hang up that there was. And at the end, they said, by they, I mean the American Embassy. They wanted us to, well, not us, the orphanage, to bring their birth parents in and do DNA testing just to ensure that the kids hadn't been kidnapped and were being stolen, you know, and sent to America. Because unfortunately that does happen in some countries. And, you know, at the time I was like, because I didn't know anything about their birth families or anything. And I was just like, oh, how long is this going to take? Again, selfishness. So she was able to find them, and they did go and do the DNA testing, and it was a match. And the parents, you know, were like, yes, we want them to go to America and to be adopted. And so that was one of the things that, again, in hindsight, I'm so glad that that happened, even though it took longer, because it gives me peace of mind that that's what they wanted. Because it did come out later, especially in Haiti, that there were some children that maybe had been kidnapped and sold to Americans. And I think if we didn't get that step right there, that I would have always had that doubt and that worry and maybe some guilt. And so that would be my advice to anyone that's going through the adoption process is, even if you get discouraged and it feels like, oh, this isn't going to happen, and you're discouraged about whatever you're getting hung up on, it might be a blessing in disguise, and just trust that eventually it's going to work out the way that it's supposed to. Because even like when we went through the failed adoptions, that was heartbreaking, but those were not our children. They were not supposed to be in our family. And the children that we have now are just, they're amazing and they're a perfect fit. And I can't imagine our life without them. I truly can't. So anyway, I ramble. I'm so sorry. I hope I'm making sense here. So while we were in the process of adopting from Haiti, I knew a girl in our community. I had worked with her in our church program as one of her leaders. And she had had a baby very young. And it was a heartbreaking situation where she really didn't have the support system. And at this particular time in her life, she was homeless. And there's a whole lot that goes into that. And I don't want to get into that because it's not my story to tell. But she reached out to me, and her baby was now 3. And she asked if we would take him and give him a home and a family. And it was completely out of the blue. You know how sometimes in stories or maybe my own daydreams, I would think, oh, wouldn't it be so wonderful if somebody just leave a baby on our front porch, And of course, that's not the way it works. But Jeremiah, he's our youngest, that was almost how it worked. I mean, it was just one day out of the blue, she called. I hadn't heard from her in years, and she called and asked that. And I was like, absolutely, we'll take him. Initially, it was just going to be a temporary thing. And since our kids from Haiti weren't home yet, I was like, it'll be perfect. And it'll give us some practice. And we already had toys and clothes to fit him because he was just a year younger than our son from Haiti. So then it ended up being because CPS kind of oversaw that situation. And so we were able to adopt him. She then asked us if we could do a permanent situation where we would adopt him. And we had already fallen in love with him and were like, yes. And so we were able to do a kinship adoption with him, even though we're not related to her. But so he came to us May 1st, and then 55 days later, our Haitian children had their visas. So we were married for 9 or 10 years with no kids. And in a matter of 2 months, we had 3 kids. So it was a little overwhelming, but overwhelming in a good way, Yeah, that first year was chaos. And because Samuel and Gracie didn't speak any English, and I knew about 5 words in Creole. So we played a lot of charades, trying to figure out what everyone needed. And Jeremiah, my youngest, he actually picked up Creole from the other 2 because they would speak to each other in Creole. So then he's speaking Creole, and I'm like, no, I can't communicate with any of you. So, I mean, I can laugh about it now. It was fun, but it was exhausting, because Samuel and Gracie, they were amazed by running water. So they'd turn all the faucets on in the house, or they'd flip the light switches on and off, on and off, on and off. Or the doorbell, they were obsessed with the doorbell. So they'd go ring the doorbell over and over and over again. Just funny things like that. But it was like total chaos because there were 3 of them and 1 of me. And James was at work all day. So, it's like, okay. But it's such fun memories for me now to look back on and be like, hey, we survived, and they're amazing, amazing kids. And I feel so humbled and grateful every single day that I get to be their mom. And I don't know what to say other than, well, as far as the birth families, like I have enormous love for their birth families. And I hope at some point that we can go back to Haiti and kind of reunite the kids with their birth families if that's what they want. My youngest, we keep somewhat in contact with his mom. And so that's nice. I love the relationship that I enjoy with her. And then Samuel and Gracie have a biological sibling that was also adopted, but by a different family. We didn't know anything about her. So she's also in the States. And so we do have contact with her, that they get to talk to her. So we at least have that, which I love, because I think it is important to have that contact with the birth family, and to just have as open of an adoption as you can. With us, that's not really reality right now, but I'm hoping at some point it can be. So adoption has just been, I love it. I absolutely love it. It has been the greatest blessing of my life. And I think my kids all think of it in a positive light. I know from their perspective, it's a much more complicated situation. And I know that adoption is built on loss, but there is still beauty and just wonderful things in adoption. And I'm not expressing myself well, because I don't want to speak on someone else's behalf, but adoption has just been a great blessing in our life. It truly has. And I really can't imagine having biological kids now. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but sometimes I think, okay, what would our life look like if we'd had biological kids and it had gone that way? And I just don't think James and I could have created the amazing kids that we have. Our kids are just, I love them to pieces, and they teach me so much. And that's the other thing, I know there's a lot of opinions on transracial adoption, as there should be. And I try to listen and learn from opinions that matter. But even that alone, I feel like has been a blessing, because I have learned and grown so much as a person from having that experience, that had it not gone the way it went, I would be a completely different person. And I'm not saying that's bad, it's just different. And I just, I think of that girl all those years ago who was just so heartbroken over not being able to be a mom. Sorry, I'm a sap and I'm starting to cry. And I just, I wish I could go back and tell her, it's going to be greater than you ever imagined. So I think that's it. Unless there was something else. Okay.
No, I love that. You have me crying, because it's just, you can feel that. And I love that. And your kids are teenagers now, right? From what I'm understanding.
Yes, they are.
And,
they are.
Oh, they're just, I just love watching your stories. And then your boys the other night, I was laughing so hard when you're like, why don't they go to bed? Because it's just like real life. But it's just amazing to me that when you brought them home and how they were just so like running water and that to me, I'm like, I don't think a lot of us realize the blessings that we do have in a lot of the lives that we have that people don't have. And so like, oh my goodness, that's just like huge. And I just love everything. It seriously has made me love you even more just listening to your story, because seriously, it's amazing. And I love that, like, yeah, it's crappy and it's hard and there's so much that you went through that you're just kind of like, why, God? But like, just what you've made it into. And I love that you also said, with obviously different, because, with me, I'm Hispanic and my parents are white when they adopted me. And I've never really had too much of that. I mean, people just assume, that my parents are Hispanic and not white. But I love that you have opened your heart to learning and listening. And granted, no matter what, you're going to get crappy comments from people.
Right.
I think that's the best thing that people can do. And I love that you have done that, because a lot of people can be closed-hearted and hate that and just be like, no, you don't know my family. You don't know me. You don't know this. But you're genuinely
Right.
taking the time to like try and learn, like you said, the
Yes.
opinions that matter. There
Right.
are those opinions that you're just
Exactly.
like, I'll listen to you, but then bye. Like I get that.
Yes.
But no, I just love it. And I love hearing these different stories. And it's just so crazy. Oh, and I was going to ask you, your kids, I don't even know how to say the language, but do they still speak? They remember any of it? I mean, granted, it wasn't used to them.
No, and that is one thing that makes me so sad. I really wish they could have held on to that. Um, they both are showing an interest in wanting to learn. And so we're looking at some options online to get some lessons. They both taken French in high school. And so Creole's kind of a mix of French and Spanish. And so, yeah, we're looking into some online options to relearn the Creole because that's something they really are interested in right now. So
That's so
I kind
cool.
of just followed their lead, as far as because I think when they were young, I was like, okay, I have to do all the things and I have to do it exactly right. And they were just like, what is this lady doing? You know? And so I finally chilled out about that and was like, okay, I'm going to follow their lead. And when they're ready, then, we'll learn Creole as a family, or we'll visit Haiti, or, whatever they're wanting at the time, because, there's so much for them to process too. I can't imagine from their perspective. So yeah, I chilled out on all that stuff.
But I think it's just being a mom. You're just, I mean, no matter
I
what, you're
think
just like,
so.
oh my gosh, this and that. It's just being a mom. You want to make sure everything's
Right.
okay. And so I absolutely love it. And
Yes.
no, I love that you have so much mad respect for the birth parents and that you want your kids to have that. And because it's not like that in all situations. When parents do
Yeah.
adopt, they don't want them to get in contact because, which I get the fear of maybe potentially going back to those birth parents and stuff. But I have every single person I have talked to that is like an adoptive mom or even the adoptees, every single mom, and it just warms my heart. Every single mom has just told their kids, like, somebody did this for you because they loved you. They wanted you to have a better life. They
Right.
wanted this. And we were the ones that were so blessed and able to have you in our lives. And
Yes.
oh,
And I think
I love it.
too, sometimes, and maybe people that are not even involved in adoption, they look at adoption and they think, like when you're talking about the fear of them going back to the birth parents or loving the birth parents or, whatever. I think that fear is completely unfounded because, you think about being a mom, right? And if you have more than one child, you love every single one of those kids. Their love multiplies in our hearts. There's enough love for everyone. And so it's the same for a child. A child can absolutely love their birth family and their adoptive family. It doesn't have to be either or, you know. So
No, and I love
I
that. And because
yeah,
like even with your biological children, like there's who knows if they're ever going to run away or something's going to happen between
right,
you where you never see that child again. And that's blood.
right,
You know what I mean? And
yeah,
for me,
right,
family's not blood, but I mean
right,
anyway it could go anyway. So
right.
oh,
Yes.
no, like seriously, thank you so much for
Oh,
doing this. Is there anything else that you can think of that
not that
you
I
would
can
like to
think of.
share?
I'm sure like an hour from now, I'm going to be like, oh,
No,
I just rambled and that didn't make any sense. And I should have said this and I should have said that. But nope, right now I can't think of anything.
no, I love it. It was perfect. Like seriously, it was so good. And
Okay.
thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing your story. And I'm
Well,
so
thank you for
excited.
letting
And
me. I
yes,
appreciate
and
it.
I will tag you. And if anybody has questions for you, they can reach out to you or whatever, anything like that. And your children are beautiful. I'm just so excited to watch you and get to know you and learn about you more because it's just so much fun. It's just,
Oh, thanks.
I just love it. So seriously, thank you
Thanks.
so much.
You are welcome. Thank you.